So you get an infection. You go to the doctor. And their job, well, it's not just to write a prescription. In that moment, they basically become a detective. They're faced with a medical mystery happening inside your body, and they have to pick the exact right tool to solve the case. Let's go ahead and open the case file.
I mean, it seems like it should be simple, right? You've got a bacterial infection, you take an antibiotic, problem solved. But think about it. If you've ever had pneumonia, and then, say, a UTI down the road, you almost certainly got completely different drugs. So why isn't there just, one magic bullet for everything?
Well, it's because every single infection is its own unique case file. It's got a specific crime scene somewhere in the body, a list of likely suspects, the bacteria, and a whole set of unique clues. Making the right choice isn't just a good idea, it's really the only way to crack the case safely and get you better.
Okay, let's dive right in. First up, case file number 1, pneumonia. The crime scene is the lungs, and our detective has to figure out who the culprit is, and they have to do it fast.
Here's the lineup of our usual suspects. For pneumonia you catch out in the community, the #1 suspect is almost always Streptococcus pneumoniae. But hey, if the patient's younger, the detective might be looking for atypicals, these sneaky bacteria that don't show up on normal tests. Now, if the infection starts in a hospital, the whole suspect list changes. We're hunting for much tougher bad guys like MRSA or Pseudomonas, especially if we have clues like recent IV antibiotic use or if the patient's on a ventilator.
Okay, so our detective has a list of suspects. Now what? Well, now they turn to their toolkit. And this isn't just some random bag of pills. This is a highly specialized set of instruments, and each one is designed for a very specific job.
The first tool they'll often reach for is something called a beta-lactam, like Ceftriaxone. You can think of this as the reliable, standard issue gear. It's the workhorse, right? The backbone of the whole operation, because it is fantastic at taking down that most common culprit, Streptococcus pneumoniae. But it does have a blind spot.
And that's where its blind spot is. Beta-lactams are completely useless against those atypical suspects we mentioned. So the detective brings in a partner, a macrolide, like azithromycin. While the beta-lactam goes after the main guy, the macrolide is a specialist for the atypicals. You put them together, and bam, you've got all your bases covered. No one's slipping through the cracks.
But what if you needed just one tool that could do the job of both? Well, that's where the fluoroquinolones come in. This is a powerful, all-in-one instrument that can handle the typical bacteria, the atypicals, and even some of the tougher suspects, all by itself. Sounds perfect, right? The ultimate all-in-one tool. But, and this is a big but, with that kind of power comes some serious risk.
So let's look at the field report on these guys. On the one hand, they have excellent coverage and they work really well as a pill, which is a huge plus. But the warnings are no joke. There is a high risk of what we call collateral damage. We're talking about some pretty serious side effects here. Things like tendon rupture, or even causing a whole new severe intestinal infection called C. diff. This is exactly why our detective saves this powerful tool only for cases where other options just won't work.
Okay, the plot thickens. The detective is analyzing the case file and finds a critical clue. The patient was recently in a hospital and was on IV antibiotics. This points directly to a highly dangerous suspect, one that's known for resisting standard tools, MRSA. This changes everything. It's time to call in the special forces. For a tough customer like MRSA, you need specialized equipment. First up, you've got the classic, Vancomycin. It's a powerful IV antibiotic, but it requires really careful monitoring to make sure it doesn't harm the kidneys. Then there's the more modern alternative, linezolid, which has the advantage of being a pill, but it's not without its own risks. It can suppress the bone marrow. The choice here depends entirely on the specifics of the case. There's absolutely no one-size-fits-all answer.
Whew. Okay, so that was the whole complicated world of pneumonia. Now let's see how our detective strategy completely changes for a different crime scene. We're closing the lung file, and we're opening a new one, the urinary tract infection, or UTI. And you know what? Right off the bat, this case is totally different. With pneumonia, we had this whole lineup of potential culprits. But with a simple, uncomplicated UTI, over 80% of the time there's just one main suspect, E. coli. And that makes the detective's job, at least at the start, much, much more focused.
Because we've got a prime suspect, the detective can pull out some really precise tools. For simple bladder infection, that's called cystitis, a drug like nitrofurantoin is like a scalpel. It's incredibly precise. But, and you really got to remember this, it only works in the bladder.
It's useless if the infection spreads up to the kidneys. Another option is the old reliable, TMP-SMX, but that's only if the local intelligence, the community resistance rates, shows that it still works against E. coli in that area.
And there it is again. It's the same exact principle we saw back in the pneumonia case. Even though we know that powerful fluoroquinolones would absolutely work here, they are not the first choice for a simple case. The risk of collateral damage is just too high. You don't bring a sledgehammer to a job that just needs a scalpel.
So what happens when the case gets really tough? When the bacteria have evolved and become resistant to all the standard tools? That's when the detective has to bring out the sledgehammer, the carbapenems. These are saved for the absolute worst of the worst, these multi-drug-resistant bacteria called ESBLs. This is literally the last line of defense.
All right, so we've walked through two completely different crime scenes, one in the lungs, one in the urinary tract, and from all this, we can actually pull out the core wisdom of our antibiotic detective. It boils down to a few golden rules that apply to every single investigation.
It really all comes down to these 4 golden rules. First up, use the narrowest tool possible. Don't use a sledgehammer when a scalpel will do. Next, you gotta know your location. Make sure the drug can actually get to the crime scene, just like we saw with UTIs. Rule 3 is a big one. Always consider the collateral damage. Save those big guns for when you absolutely, positively need them. And finally, de-escalate whenever you can. As soon as the lab gives you a positive ID on the culprit, switch to a smarter, more targeted weapon.
And all this, it leads to one final, really critical question. The job of the antibiotic detective is getting harder every single year. See, the bad guys, the bacteria, they're not standing still. They are constantly evolving, developing new ways to resist our best tools. The challenge for medicine, and really for all of us, is to make sure our detectives always have the tools and the intelligence they need to stay one step ahead.